Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's probably not the morning wherever you are. Maybe it is for some of you, but welcome back to Tailosive Tech Live on YouTube. The cat's out of the bag. I switched my phone. You're witnessing this live stream over the iPhone 10 camera right now. Now, of course, I'll get the big wave of complaints now that you know what it's from. Of course, no one complained last week. No one even said anything. No one could even notice, but we've got a lot of catching up to do for this stream. A lot of little nuggets of stories. The first one we're kicking off with in the title and thumbnail, though, is without disappointment, Apple has internally, once again, delayed the Apple Reality Pro, which, you know, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that a product that drastically different that likely would get a developer kit, just like the Apple TV got a dev kit, and I think the Apple Watch was easy to emulate, so they didn't really do a dev kit for it, but Apple Silicon got a dev kit before it officially launched. You know, it would make a lot of sense if Apple was to enter the augmented reality headset market. They would probably drop it in Dub because that's supposed to be a developer conference, if you will. But yeah, it sounds so repetitive and it sounds so tiring for the like 8th year in a row or whatever to hear them say, "Oh, they pushed it back another couple months." So I guess I'm I'm more dismissive now that this is really a thing, because if it's not ready by June, then I'm definitely gonna think this is just an internal tool slash made up leak that doesn't really go anywhere. Um, this is insanely disappointing. I don't even care at this point, man. I'm in the same boat, Christian, because I'll actually be gone. I'll be out of the country for a large stretch of this summer, so that's making me think like, who cares? Like, if something comes out that's really big and really different, I probably won't be able to test it anyway. The title is Apple Reality Pro, but in reality, everyone's just going to be talking about your iPhone 10. Well, I think that we need to figure out. We'll talk about that. I'll address the chat, and of course, we got questions from the Tailosive Tech Pro members, of course. So there's a lot of things we'll dive into in the stream, but the main one that I want you guys to help me figure out, and maybe we can write a poll for this. Let's start a poll. When can we when can we give up and admit the Apple headset isn't a real thing? If it's not out by when should we start? If it's some people are just gonna say right now. I've already given up. So the first option will be if it's not out by WWDC. Another option could be if it's not out by end of 2023. Another option is I already gave up. Some people will probably vote that. And then the last option, you got to give the optimists a chance, which is just never say never, which means even if the headset doesn't come out in 2023, even if it doesn't come out in 2024, 2025, it might still be in the works. Ethan says 5 years ago. So I think that's how I want to draw the line somewhere. I want to get to a point where we as a community, at least the Tailosive Tech fan base and myself, I like how the very first vote was I already gave up. That's beautiful. So please do vote in the poll, because I would love to get together and figure out like when can we draw the line on this. Because if you guys remember, we definitely felt like giving up, or at least I felt like giving up when AirTags didn't come out for like 2 years straight. They were referenced in iOS code, which really made me think they must be real. And they didn't come out. Then Apple opened the Find My network to third parties before AirTags even launched. So my thought process was, well, maybe they were going to release AirTags, but they were worried about antitrust, so they decided not to release it at all. And then a couple months went by, and they straight up released it. And after all of us thinking that AirTags were maybe internally canceled or that kind of thing. So that's... And that was leaked a lot less time than this Apple headset has been leaked. There's been reports about this headset dating back since 2018. I remember making videos on it. Here we are 5 years later, and we're still talking about it. Oh, it's been delayed again. It's been delayed again. Yeah, Mateo Mossi is saying if it's not out by the end of 2023, I'll have no hope for it. Interesting. There's still a decent amount of hope in the chat, but 41% of the vote is already saying I already gave up. Seems like 29% say if it's not out by the end of 2023, they'll give up. Wasn't Reality OS referenced in an iOS beta or something, or was that just bull? I think it has been referenced many times, but again, I don't think that necessarily means the product is guaranteed to exist. It's one thing that we could guarantee that Apple has worked on it, but I don't think anyone's really surprised by that. I think most of us can probably agree internally, Apple has prototypes for headsets, foldable phones. They probably have prototypes of folding iPads or Macs with touchscreens. There's always prototypes and stuff they're researching. Does that mean they'll actually release it, though? That's a different discussion. So there could easily be a Reality OS reference within iOS code that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it exists or that kind of thing. When AirPower drops, yeah. The reality will be is that it'll be out of my budget. Yeah, I think that would be most people's situations as well. Malek says, better deal, iPad 10 or iPhone 14 Plus? Oof. God, why are you asking me these tough questions? I'm inclined to lean towards whatever the cheaper one is when you're asking for two horrible deals. I don't recommend the iPad 10 or iPhone 14 Plus to anyone for any reason, by the way. But if you're asking me to choose between the two, I'm usually going to push towards the cheaper one because it's like, okay, it's a waste of money either way, so it might as well be a smaller waste of money. But at the same time, iPad 10 really annoys me, but I'll just stay consistent with my formula, okay? If both are a bad deal, then choose the cheaper one, which in this case would be the iPad 10, I guess. Let's see. Honestly, even with the Quest 2 at $300, I'm not too interested in VR. Definitely not interested in the Pro headset. Maybe when they make a regular one, but they'd still need to do something special. I think that's the key. Like, I'm feeling the same way Burkhart is. I'm pretty dismissive of it because I cannot fit a VR headset into my personal life very well. Like, I've tried, and I use my phone a lot, I use my computer a lot, and I use my TV, and I use headphones, and I use my watch. I can't figure out the where in the ecosystem the VR headset fits and what it's supposed to enable me to do that I couldn't do for cheaper. Like if it's just Mac external monitors, I could buy an external monitor for much, much cheaper than a reality headset, and then everybody in the room can see it instead of just one person at a time. But at the same time, I got to admit, I was not super into smartwatches before the Apple Watch came out, and I was never really that into smartphones before the iPhone came out. So in a similar way, Apple has a history and kind of a track record of learning how to make something for the mainstream, learning how to work it into our daily lives. And maybe there's some use case, maybe there's some argument for it that I have not seen, and I have a tiny brain and I can't figure it out, and Apple needs to show me why I want it. But at least with the current implementation, because yes, I've tried the Quest headsets, and yes, I've tried HTC Vive, I've tried back in the day when it was Oculus, and I tried Galaxy VR and all that. I've tried so many different implementations of VR, and none of them have ever won me over to like, oh, this is a next big thing. It's always been niche, like, oh, this is cool for a couple of games, but not most games, and definitely not something I would do regularly. It's more of a party trick. But Apple's not against party tricks. I feel like LiDAR is almost entirely party tricks, too. So thank you for the super chat, Jacob. He says, I had no hope for the Apple headset from the start. Fair enough. I had very little hope, but as the reports about it got a bit more specific, and especially once I heard the name leaked Apple Reality Pro, that definitely made me think, yeah, it sounds like something. But, the more I think about it, this is a good way of me describing it to you guys. The more I think about it is, obviously, Tim Cook has himself in interviews said that Apple is interested in augmented reality a lot more than virtual reality. And Tim, I remember years ago saying that the hardware for AR was not quite there yet, but they were excited for the future of it and the capabilities of it. And I don't think they were just referring to a couple of furniture apps on the App Store. I think, obviously, there's been some, me knowing Apple, I've been following them very closely, and I kind of get where they view um, usefulness of things. And I get the feeling that Apple really wanted to do glasses. You know, they really wanted to have just a sleek, stylish pair of glasses that you could wear all day, and they could be fashionable, that also just happen to project 3D holograms on top of your vision, and that could enhance the entire ecosystem. And I think as years went on, they realized how challenging that hardware is, and it's not around the corner like we thought it was. I would have thought in 2017 that, oh yeah, by 2023 or 2024, we'd have the technology to put little holograms on normal looking prescription glasses or sunglasses. And we're just a few years behind, but that tech is coming. Here we are in 2023. I've seen augmented reality glasses and stuff, and it's still just not there yet. So the way I'm looking at Apple Reality Pro is more and more believable, but more and more lacking of a vision to me. Like, it sounds more and more like a compromise, like a boardroom made a decision. Um, like a boardroom was like, okay, well, if we can't do the headset and Tim Cook wants to be around for one more big product release, Tim's like, yeah, I won't retire unless we do one more big like product category. They're like, okay, well, we can't do the headset, but maybe we can do, I mean, we can't do the glasses, but maybe we can do the mixed reality headset now, and that will get us ready for glasses down the road. And it just turns into this kind of niche of a product, kind of like the original HomePod, which found a very passionate fan base, but this would be even narrower than that, because all the rumors, if we're going to believe the rumors, they're all saying it's going to be $3,000. So this is going to be more niche than the Mac Pro um, and AirPods Max and that kind of thing. Like way more niche than any of those. It would be Apple's like smallest demographic, kind of like the Pro Display XDR. Like they spent a lot of time engineering it. How many people are going to buy it? Not that many, but the people who do really like it for some reason, for development or for construction or for some niche use in the enterprise world, Apple will please a very small group of people, but they can say, see, okay, Tim, you did it. You introduced the new product. And he goes, okay, I'm all done. I can retire now. But it doesn't really go anywhere. Yeah, I don't think Apple's going to make their own Sims game. Let's see. Battery pack strapped to your waist, a cable running to your head, no real world application outside of your home. I just don't see what I would use this for. I agree. I'm seeing it that way now, but who knows? Maybe they can convince me of something else I just don't know about yet. Sometimes Apple surprises me. You know, I didn't see Dynamic Island coming, and I didn't think Apple would make something like the AirTags. I didn't think they would make them that cheap, and I didn't think they would make the battery user replaceable. They were rumored for a long time, but a lot of people didn't envision them to be what they ended up being, and now they've basically become one of the most popular geo-tracking devices out there. Um, let's see. Why did you say 14 Plus was going to be the bestseller knowing the price? Now you're saying you hate it. Well, I didn't know as much about the specs. I recall in my previous videos, I think I said, I was scrolling back and looking at these the other day. There was still back and forth about whether the 14 Plus would get promotion or not. And when I did the video saying I think the 14 Plus would be the best seller, for one, I didn't know about Dynamic Island. I thought that the big difference between the Pro and the Plus was just going to be hole versus notch. Now I find out it's this whole UI update that changes everything. So, oh, thank you, Zen. Oh, that's cool. Celebrate the first super chat from Zen. People get like balloons next to their message when they super chat. Because yeah, I didn't know about the specs. Back when I did that video, I didn't know it would still have the A15 chip. I didn't know that it would still have 60 hertz. Now that I know that the 14 Pro's got Dynamic Island, now that I know the 14 Plus is 60 hertz and still $900, and they reused the A15 chip, that made it a lot harder of a sell, essentially, because I was like, okay, well, this is just a worse version of the 13 Pro Max, which you're going to be able to find for about the same price, maybe cheaper these days. So yeah, I didn't have all the pieces yet, which is why I'm hesitant to give you guys more answers, because a lot of the time you ask like, Drew, when are you going to upgrade your this? When are you going to upgrade that? And I'm like, I shouldn't act like I know everything, you know? I should act like Apple's got to make their case. And it's kind of my same opinion towards Apple Reality Pro is like, well, I don't think it sounds like something Apple would make, and I don't think I would find very many uses for it, but I need to wait for Apple to make their case because there's a lot of software examples and a lot of use cases that Apple comes up with that I didn't really think about before I saw it. We're only getting little pieces of the puzzle before the hardware actually ships. Once you get the entire picture, you're like, okay, that makes sense, or okay, that doesn't make sense. So thank you, Zen, for the super chat. He says, my favorite iPhone was 6S Space Gray. The aluminum, thin body, round edges. I can give up glass back. The iPhone 7 coating didn't feel the same. Interesting. We're getting real picky now. The coating of the aluminum doesn't feel right. But not the 6. No, it has to be the 6S because that's got the 3D touch. I don't know. The sour taste in my mouth from the 6S was the fact that they introduced the 4K camera, but they still shipped it with 16 gigs of storage. That's a crime in my book. Like, that should be illegal. You should not be able to ship a 4K camera with a 16 gig NAND on the inside, I guess. So thank you for the super chat. Let's see. I think Apple will make something soon related to a headset or AR VR in 2023. Okay, fair enough, Ninja Squid. The chat seems, the vote seems kind of spread out. I mean, most people have already given up, it appears. But a decent amount, like a third of the votes, say that they would never say never. So there's a chance that Apple will do it. It just might not be this year. It might not be next year. But very few people want to give up at WWDC, which is funny. It's like, okay, even if this thing comes out, like, even if this thing isn't out by the end of the year, there's a decent number of people that are like, yeah, no, let's just wait and see. Let's see. I don't see the VR headset thing being something I'd buy. I see myself buying AR glasses or contact lenses since they're much less bulkier. Right. It's just, Ethan, I don't think those are going to exist in the near term. I've seen existing companies come up with augmented reality glasses, and the tech is just not there. And I know that Apple could probably pull together a little bit better tech than what other companies have come up with, but it's just nowhere even close to what I think Apple would want it for it to be genuinely useful, not just a widget like Google Glass where it just puts a little icon in the top corner of your vision, something that's worth charging all the time. You know, that's going to make you have to work for it a lot more often. So I think that that's what Apple wants, but they just, the technology is so complicated. Let's see. We have people talking about ChatGPT, which I got comments on. So this is a good time to transition here. We've got some questions from the Tailosive Tech Pro members that were pre-asked before the live stream. So eUpload said, on that note, thoughts on the new Bing AI search, and do you think Siri will ever see any improvements or come close to the level of intelligence Bing search in ChatGPT has? So this is a very hot topic. It's coming up a lot these days. Everyone's discussing it. And personally, I find it a little bit overrated. I think people love to accredit a lot of capability to AI chat in the machine learning algorithms. And, you know, I've watched some videos that explain kind of how a neural net works and how neural net training works. And I think that they're very good at showing potential. I'm not convinced they're that great at delivering on things. I think that they're like impressive at surface level, but once you start actually trying to apply it in day-to-day life is when it starts fumbling apart. I don't know. I kind of look at AI and ChatGPT like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like aerogel, but they have this like really, really lightweight materials that are like light as a feather, but structural, that is like rigid, but then under certain circumstances, you know, you don't have to apply much force to it. It can break in half. And that's kind of how I feel about ChatGPT. It's like, if you don't touch it very much and you just kind of leave it be for a second and ask it a question, it's like, oh yeah, that's really impressive how it was able to assemble those words and it gathered that from this information. But then once you put it in the real world, it's not accurate enough and it's not precise enough to accomplish any kind of meaningful work. It's just very good at sounding impressive. And of course, YouTube channels and on Twitter and of course internet personalities, we only highlight when it does things really impressively, because that gets views, that gets clicks when we show off what it's capable of. But when it fails and it makes mistakes and it makes pretty obvious mistakes, that's not as impressive. We don't talk about it as much. Um, and to tie that all back to Siri versus Bing and that kind of thing, I feel like digital assistants in general are not used to the extent that tech companies think they are. Or if they are used, they're used for very basic things like setting timers, playing music, or sending a text message. I don't think people spend that much time asking complicated questions to their digital assistants because they're not that accurate and they're not that reliable. And human beings do not enjoy having to be very precise with articulation. That's why public speaking is one of the greatest fears, is requires a lot of like eyes on you slash articulating properly, because you can't really mess up. Face-to-face conversation, one-on-one, it's not as much pressure. But when you're talking to a digital assistant or an AI, if you misspeak or you type things a little bit off, that can throw off all of the results. And a lot of the time you need that human element to be able to detect that, oh, they corrected themselves, or oh, that's not what they meant, that kind of thing. So I feel like it's cool tech, it's impressive, but I feel like we've been talking about AI and machine learning replacing this or replacing that, or it's getting really smart, or it's getting really good. I just feel like I've been following this for years and it never really goes anywhere. And I was actually talking with a friend of mine about this who's was having a conversation with the guy from Microsoft, and they were discussing it about how it's human beings have this optimistic way of looking at technology because we've seen it grow and change faster than we expect, right? Like the information age, the internet age, or cameras on smartphones, or batteries, or displays. We see this rapid iteration when there's tons of demand. And when we see that rapid iteration, we tend to apply that to more and more things. So now every piece of technology, that's going to get better linearly over time. That next year it'll be 10%, then after that 10%, then after that 10%. And we apply that to lots of different things. And I think that's one of the greatest like false hopes of a lot of AI and machine learning algorithms is they're very good at looking almost done. They're very good at looking, oh, this is so close. Like, look how much it was able to do. Yeah, it made a couple mistakes here and there, but just a couple more years of refinement and this will be perfect. And that's what I think a lot of humanity is probably falling for, is they're seeing the potential of it, but I think the inherent design limitations of the neural net is probably going to always have little flaws and little errors that prevent it from completely replacing that many jobs or being that much of a selling point. Like I don't, Siri has always kind of been stupid from the beginning. I've seen a lot of people say Siri is the dumbest digital assistant, and I don't really fight people on that, but I use the Google Assistant more than anything, and it still makes a lot of mistakes. It still messes up, and it still has errors from time to time, and it still doesn't understand context or, certain expressions if you don't say something perfectly. So I'm like, yeah, okay, Siri might be the dumbest, but I don't think the others are that much smarter. But all of that to say, sure, okay, let's just agree for the sake of the argument, Google Assistant or Bing search or Bing ChatGPT, they're all really smart. They're all geniuses. But Apple continues to have some of the best-selling hardware in the world, particularly with smartphones, but definitely with watches, with AirPods, with iPads, and MacBooks are on the rise. iOS market share is on the rise. So Apple seems to be capturing more and more of the market as time goes on, and they're selling at higher and higher volume. And most of the time, the iPhone 14 or whatever, it's not competing with the Galaxy S23. You notice the Galaxy S phones aren't like even on the top 10 or top 15 best-selling phones in the world. No, the iPhone 14 is competing with the iPhone 13. Apple's biggest enemy with iPhones and this is kind of what has inspired me to change up my strategy with the channel. I don't need to review flagship Androids because that's not what most people are considering when they're looking at the new iPhone. They're comparing the new iPhone to last year's model or 2 years models ago, their current phone and how it's aged, and is that upgrade worth it? So I think that's a more relatable discussion because most people aren't switching between iOS and Android all the time, but they're constantly debating, should I upgrade, should I wait, or should I buy an older model? That I think relates a lot more to my audience and what you guys are most interested in. So like all of this has sold incredibly well without Apple really putting much emphasis on the digital assistant at all. They've really not put much attention towards Siri in the past 5 years, and yet sales have been great. So to me, if anything, that's evidence that the average consumer is not really that interested in how smart of an AI bot you can fit on a phone. Most people are using the phone so that they can text people, take pictures, and have good battery life and watch videos, and that's where all the screen time is going. Not so much towards random curiosity. Oh, I wonder how that works. Oh, I wonder how that works. Because, of course, from the beginning, the Google Assistant's been great at that, but that hasn't really translated into great sales. I think the Pixel started selling well when the price, battery life, and software and camera was all performing well. It wasn't because the Google Assistant has always been top-notch and always been the best on the Pixel from the beginning, but they didn't really go anywhere until they got the hardware right. So I don't think that Apple puts a lot of emphasis towards it, and it doesn't seem to be hurting them. Like, I don't think they're losing a lot of customers because of how dumb Siri is, personally. Let's see. Contact lenses are not going to happen ever, and if they do happen, they wouldn't pass regulatory bodies like FDA because of something with all the radios directly on your eyes. Probably not safe. And, I mean, I would hesitate. Never say never, right? I mean, I don't know if they'll be ready in my lifetime, but, you know, there's technology could change. John Snow, thank you for the super chat. Quick change of topic. Thoughts on the Magic Mouse? I love it. I think I'm the only one. You're not the only one, but the Magic Mouse is definitely very controversial because it's such an oddly shaped mouse that's not like most mice out there. And I think it's because most people are used to resting their palm on the mouse itself, or at least a decent size of their hand on the mouse. And the Magic Mouse is more designed for you to rest your palm on the desk, and you just use the sides of your fingers to move it around. I've been using it for 12 years now. It's never made my hand sore. I've used it for 10, 12 hours straight, never had an issue. It's still my favorite mouse because I can move the mouse on the screen while simultaneously scrolling side to side and up and down, which comes up a lot in my editing workflow. So, yes, the charge method is stupid, but when the battery life is 6 to 8 weeks, I don't really care how stupid it is because I don't have to do it very much. And for some people, it's unergonomic and it's uncomfortable and it feels awkward for them, to which I respond, you're holding it wrong. But you're probably just used to a different sized mouse, and that's what you grew up with. Because to me, like, I have evidence in my life of multiple different people that only use the Magic Mouse and they don't have carpal tunnel, they don't have knuckle issues, their hand doesn't. My dad is the other example. He started using the Magic Mouse, not this one. The first one was AA batteries, and that's the one he was used to, and he's always preferred that one, and he uses that for hours and hours a day, and I'm the same way. So we're both different ages, and, you know, we have different hand sizes and stuff, but we're very comfortable with it. And then, of course, every once in a while, I hear people like Jon Snow say they love it. So I think it's just a personal preference thing. Some people like to hold the mouse a little bit differently. I don't think it has much to do with size of your hand or your age. Caleb in the chat is also saying he loves the Magic Mouse. So yeah, it's just a personal preference thing. Zen says, you're welcome for this. Oh my God, again? You're welcome for the super chat. Thoughts on under fingerprint sensor for iPhones? I'm not seeing rumors on it anymore. I feel like if Apple was interested in bringing back the fingerprint reader, they would have done it by now, because especially during the pandemic when people were wearing face masks, it would have made a lot of sense to be like, hey, here's an iPhone with Touch ID. And the fact that they didn't do that at all in the past 3 years is like, okay, I don't know why they would ever do it at this point. But yeah, you're right. The rumors have gone quiet. So my guess is Apple just doesn't see the point of putting two biometrics on the same phone. In the old days, I thought, you know, that would have been a good idea just as a selling point, not because people are going to use both, but just having options. Just like you can choose to charge your iPhone with MagSafe, or you can choose to charge it with Lightning. You know, it doesn't hurt anything, but I guess it was probably increasing the price of production unnecessarily, and Apple's probably right in assuming that most consumers were probably just going to pick one biometric and not use the other one ever, in which case it's kind of wasteful. But again, I feel the same way about LiDAR. Who's using LiDAR these days? There's a lot of people with LiDAR that are never using it. Um, let's see. Still running Unix under the hood with the exact same commands, unless you run Windows, which is different but not in any relevant. What are you guys talking about? This current phase in AI is expected to peak in around 3 years. How can people know when it's going to peak? Katrina says, I don't think AI has really progressed at all since the 1970s. Computers are still fundamentally the same under the hood. I think that I've watched so many times over the years, people get really excited for some kind of really smart bot that you type and talk to. I remember, I forget the name of it, but there was this website where you could talk to an AI. I remember it in high school, and it had pretty clever responses, and it could pull up information. And now I see a very similar wave with ChatGPT. And I'm not saying there's no difference. I'm sure it's better. I just think that the trail of nines is a lot more complicated than people think. It's kind of a common situation because this neural net training and real world data and training based on user interaction. This conversation comes up a lot in the EV community with full self-driving, because Tesla's been trying to solve full self-driving for years, and they keep saying, maybe it was Alice Bot, Katrina, you might be right about that. But I think, like, for years they've been saying, okay, this is really close, and it can drive like pretty safe, and it can do 70% of drives all by itself, but we're only a couple of years, and it took us 5 years to get to 70%, which means it should only take us 3 to 4 years to finish the final 30%, whereas the truth is the last 10 to 15%, or even the last 5% of use cases in which, okay, this is good enough to replace jobs, or this is like fully sentient, or general intelligence, or this can replace journalists and that kind of thing. That last 5% ends up being way more complicated than the first 95%. So that makes it appear very final. When you play with it now and you experiment with it today, you go, wow, this is so impressive. This is really cool. This is really capable. And your brain immediately is thinking, okay, this is going to be even better, and this is going to be perfect within a couple of years. But then it never quite makes it to perfect. And therefore, it can't really replace that many jobs, and mostly becomes just a really fun tool. I think that ChatGPT in particular is probably going to disrupt a lot of schools more than anything. I've seen some professors in interviews talking about it, but it's more about like getting a grade in a class. It's not really replacing any type of, reimbursed labor. You pay to go to school and get grades. You don't get paid to write essays. There's not really a job. Maybe there is that I'm not aware of. I mean, journalists kind of do this, but I don't think ChatGPT is really that good to replace a large number of journalists. Honestly, I feel like Twitter as a platform probably has replaced more journalists than ChatGPT has. Because people don't read articles anymore. People just read headlines and skim articles. So the accuracy of the article itself isn't that important. Journalists, a lot of them aren't that good in the first place. And they're not really reimbursed all that much, because in the information age, you don't have that much value just typing words on a website anymore. Because we see this all the time. Like, people try to put information, or these leakers talk about Apple Reality Pro, or they talk about the new iPhone. They talk about whatever, and they try to put it behind a paywall. But then, of course, every free news agency out there reads what's inside the paywall and rewords it on their website. And you don't really need a bot to do that. You can do that already, and it doesn't take that much time. So it's interesting tech, but I think it's mostly just that, interesting tech. I don't know how exactly disruptive it's going to be, but I'm not an expert on it. Of course, I haven't extensively used ChatGPT like all the time, but I just don't think there's a ton of use for that in most people's daily lives. I don't think most people are just searching the internet to answer questions for them. I mean, they have Google search, but they're not looking for a bot to write up sentences about their answer. They're looking for a link. They're looking for pictures. They're looking for shopping results. And we already have search algorithms that are very advanced that do that without being, a dedicated bot or what have you. But yeah. Half of the people with a Pro Series phone with LiDAR probably don't even know what LiDAR is. Yeah, I think you're right. Uh, Mighty Mouse is a different story. Oh, yeah, I hated the Mighty Mouse. That was terrible. I would rather implant a chip into my brain than use a contact lens. That just seems weird and limiting and probably unlikely. I don't know about that. I think the the contact lens would probably be less intrusive because at least you could take it out whenever you feel like it. Um, Dan Russell says, at this stage, I suspect the leakers just say, sorry, I almost said leechers, but maybe there's truth to that expression. um, Cover face by saying things are delayed when in fact Apple had zero intention of releasing said device this year. That has absolutely happened, and every time Apple Reality Pro gets delayed, I feel more and more like this is another one of those made up stories that's meant to push clicks but doesn't actually go anywhere. Um, as far as AI goes, do you honestly believe big tech will release the current version to the public? No, they have more advanced AI behind the scenes. You are getting the version they had 5 years ago. I mean, there may be some truth to that, but I don't think I don't I don't think that there's some internal great AI that they just think is too dangerous for the public to see. I think you're probably witnessing the best of it because usually the most talented and the most capable AI bots are the ones that have the most real world training, which you get by opening it to the public so that everybody can use it. So if you have an internal AI, it has substantially less real world data to work off of, and it's probably not that good. So I don't think that's how it works, but I believe AI wrote Face ID algorithm. AI expensive. I'm sure corporations use it, not everyday people. There has to be business models to develop a good AI. Yeah, well, I don't even know if AI is the proper word for that, proper term for that, but there's definitely neural cores in our own Apple Silicon. Even the iPhone 10 with the A11 chip has neural cores in it, and there's certain things that they come up with for iOS for backdoor features. For example, the subject lift and a lot of computational photography uses neural nets, which is just a lot of practicing and retraining itself, and basically the software is teaching itself how to net a more positive result for the end user. And that's around us in our day-to-day lives. Like Amazon uses neural nets to figure out where to put inventory in their warehouses, and they can kind of predict based on buying behavior where when there's going to be a big wave of orders for this product versus this product, so they will stock the warehouses differently. That's been going on for years. There's all kinds of algorithms that you can predict and anticipate consumer behavior that's being used by businesses on the back end. But I don't think the main question we were addressing in the Tailosive Tech Pro comments was about how like, will Siri get the same improvements? So Siri is not meant for business use. Siri is meant for end consumer use, and that's why I just feel like, yeah, no, it's probably not ever going to be as smart or as interesting as ChatGPT, but that doesn't really matter because I don't think ChatGPT as a end consumer feature is going to convince that many people to use one digital assistant over the other, or it's not going to influence buying behavior all that much. I think it's popular to talk about in the tech community, but in the real world, not that many people really care. Okay. And Marngel said, how long do you plan to keep the iPhone 10? Just as long as possible until it simply cannot meet your needs or something? Pretty much. It's kind of an educational experience for me to figure out, like, what are my needs? And like, because it's not like there's a bunch of features like, I desperately need a telephoto lens. iPhone 10 does not have it, therefore I cannot live with iPhone 10. It's like, yeah, no, I can live without the telephoto lens, and I have before. Like my iPhone 12 mini didn't have one, but I'm experimenting with the iPhone 10 camera now, and of course I'll be taking a big trip and I'll be filming a lot of videos of travel and also just work videos for Tech and EV when I'm away for weeks and weeks later this year, and I want to see, is the battery life, is the camera so inherently bad that I feel like I cannot work, or I feel like the videos have been compromised so much that it's damaging my brand or something. I'm trying to figure out what my bottom line is. What is my bare minimum? So I don't have a specific date. I'm not saying like 1 year done. Okay, 1 year goes by and now I'll change my iPhone 10. And also, I'm not committing to anything. I'm just kind of taking it day by day. So if iPhone 15 has something that's really compelling, that is convincing to me, that I decide I need that, or that's going to be really useful for my work, I could upgrade to the 15. I may not upgrade to the 15. I might not even get the 15 Pro. If I just decide that USB-C is really important for me for some reason, I could just go with the regular iPhone 15 because I'm not prioritizing 120 hertz on my phone as much as I used to. So, yeah, that's pretty much my answer for Marngel. Joshua Miller was basically asking how long I actually plan on using it, which is, I guess, until it breaks or until I feel too limited by it. And at this point, I'm loving it, and I don't feel limited by it, so I'm just going to keep using it. YJ says as long as the battery lasts, which is a funny comment, but not true, because at this point, I would rather replace the battery in my iPhone 10 if it was causing issues. But right now, the battery health is at 84%, and I'm still fine living with it. So I'll refresh this. Okay, Burkhart's commenting right as I do the stream. Okay, now that you're manning the iPhone 10, do you think it's more likely that you'll upgrade to the 15 Pro? Even if you just use it for 7 months, it'd still be interesting. On top of that, when you do end up upgrading, I think buying the smaller 6.1-inch size would be a good way to combat your smartphone addiction, less battery life, and smaller screen to work with. It's not a terrible idea, but that's not really the point of the test. The point is to try to find what the limitations are for me and for the phone itself. So I guess I'm looking for, like, for one, sure, the 6.1-inch might help with the smartphone addiction, but also, thank you. Geez, Zen is super chatting way too much today, but thank you. I want to, like I said in my video about switching to the iPhone 10, I want to experience the things that are lacking on the 10, so that I know what other people with older phones are going through, because most of the user data I'm seeing is showing that the majority of my audience is not buying the latest and greatest iPhone, or the majority of the tech audience as a whole, they buy their phones and they hold them for 2, 3, 4 years. So that just upgrading right away kind of goes against that. And I'm also like, the likelihood of me just buying a 15 Pro because it came out and it's new and it's cool is not super high in my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe they come up with something. I can't think of a feature right now that I would be like, I need to have that. And I'm aware of USB-C and I'm aware of the camera improvements and all that. I'm just saying, if I discover that there's something really, really wrong with the iPhone 10 that's preventing me from working or preventing me from getting through the day, I wouldn't be opposed to upgrading to another older iPhone. There's a lot of phones that came out after the 10 but before the 15. So maybe I'll say, okay, I like the small size, but I want a better camera, so I'll get a 12 mini or a 13 mini or 11. But, there's so much potential upgrades from the iPhone 10. It doesn't have to just be the 15 or just be the 10. So my go-to answer is to say, like, I'll still review it for the record. There's a very big difference between reviewing a phone and upgrading to the phone. So I was hoping I made that clear for you guys, that I reviewed the iPhone 14 Pro Max, but I didn't keep it. I wasn't upgrading to it. I wanted to cover its uses. I wanted to have real world data with it, and I plan on doing the same thing with the iPhone 15. But at this point, I really like the size of the 10. I really like the feel in the hand. And it still feels pretty responsive. I mean, there's certain things that are a little bit slower, but not drastically, not like so slow I feel like I can't, use it properly. I just kind of missed the form factor, and I like how lightweight it is, and I like how small the camera is on the back. The bump doesn't take up that much space, and overall, the dynamic range is nowhere near as good as the 13 Pro, but I tend to think high dynamic range is oftentimes overrated and not as useful as people think it is. There were definitely times when Smart HDR overprocessed images and annoyed me with the newer phones. And I feel like all of our pictures and videos get compressed to heck anytime we share them on social media anyway. Instagram and Twitter and YouTube, they're not going to let you post the raw pro res, files and host them. They're going to steamroll them with their compressors regardless. So um, let's see. You reminded me about my iPhone 10. Actually, I turned it on and I'm using it for work now. Thanks for reminding me. Oh, cool, Caleb. You're welcome. Burkhardt says, absolutely not. I know far more people in the real world that care about ChatGPT than my tech circle. Everyone in my tech circle sees AI stuff all the time, but general people are impressed by it. Well, it's all anecdotal, Michael, but I can tell you confidently, literally no one in my personal life knows what ChatGPT is. And I know I know, I don't mean to brag or anything, but I'm fairly social. Like, I know a lot of people. I would say there's like 20 or 30 people that I can attest to say, like, bring it up to them and they're like, what is it? And I've brought it up at conversation at, dinner tables and stuff. Maybe your social circle's different than mine, but it just seems like the new hit thing, and it feels like that's happened a lot with AI bots in particular. But yeah, I am enjoying the iPhone 10 overall. It's been good. Zen says, crazy thought. What if Apple has an earpiece camera that connects to the iPhone and AirPod? What are you talking about? Earpiece camera, like on your ear here? That connects to the iPhone and AirPods, gives voice directions, info based on what it captures. I don't know what it would see that it would give directions on. The iPhone might be the brain for the AI. Good night. That's weird. I'm trying to visualize what you're saying, but what directions would it be giving? What tutorial? Like, it's just vision, like you're plumbing or something, and it watches you. It's like, change this. That I don't know. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it's interesting. I think it would be way easier and cheaper to just point the phone at whatever you want advice from. There's a lot of YouTubers today using the iPhone Pros as the main cameras for cricket. That's why I ask. That's why I ask you, what do you think? Hey, what did you ask me, Marcelo? Oh, iPhone Pro becoming more focused on cameras, video for professional video production. Do you see that coming maybe with changeable lenses? I don't think changeable lenses will ever work on something as small as a phone, but they already have aftermarket lenses you can attach, but people do. The point of the smartphone camera is that it doesn't really need that much additional hardware. That's why it's so popular, and that's why it's so intriguing for so many people. Is you can just pull it out of your pocket and start recording. So if you start attaching more and more like external mics, external cameras, and external mounts, it kind of defeats the purpose. Now at that point, you might as well just use a dedicated camera. But I feel like there's always going to be room for neural net training on how those cameras perform, and the camera bump, as big as it is now, can probably get a lot bigger. They can fit larger sensors, they can put larger lenses. Apple hasn't even gotten to periscope lenses yet, so there's probably a lot of room for improvement without doing manual lenses and that kind of stuff. Sin says, don't change topics due to my questions just for future streams. I don't want to take away from everyone else. Whatever you get to, it's okay. Well, no, man, you're donating to the stream. That's a lot of money you've donated. So yeah, I might focus on what you're asking. That's kind of what the point of the stream is for that real-time interaction. So basically the people who donate those questions are pushed to the front of the line. That's why we talk about the Tailosive Tech Pro questions before we jump into the live chat. Yeah, the camera would get blocked by people's hair as an earpiece. That's a good point. But I appreciate so much. You guys are being far too generous today. Start Select says, I really enjoy old iPhone in year content, so I fully support this change. I'm recognizing that smartphone addiction is also a problem in my life. That's good. I was actually really happy to see how many people were willing to admit that they were struggling with the same things I was struggling with. Because it's an increasingly larger problem. I'm debating doing a bigger video on it, or more of a documentary series, but I feel like smartphones are like, thank you for the super chat, Gigi. I'll read that in a second. I feel like smartphones have become like the physically healthy cigarette. A lot of people just always liked having that little cigarette there, and it used to be a really common thing when there wasn't much education on what cigarettes and smoking did to your body. But once it became, you know, well aware that this was like killing your lungs and bad for you, like really really bad for you. There was all this work to prevent secondhand smoke, and there's no smoking zones, and you can't smoke inside, you can't smoke on planes. A long time ago, people were smoking everywhere, and they didn't really know about it. And I feel like in many ways, smartphones might be similar. Not in a, I know they're not like necessarily that physically unhealthy. You know, a smartphone isn't really giving you lung cancer as much as a cigarette is, but I think mentally, over time, we'll probably find out how damaging it is to our mental health and our social ability. Like I even see it with younger generations, you know, like kids that grew up with smartphones, whereas I didn't have a smartphone until I was in my teenage years. So a lot of my childhood, we didn't really have maybe iPods, but not really the same thing. You know, we didn't have connected multi-touch devices with all day battery life. And now with so many different social media platforms encouraging everybody to have a voice, and you're supposed to get as many hits as you can and get as many takes as you can. And you, if you don't have a voice, if you don't have a say, or if you don't have a take on a service or an announcement, then it's like you don't exist. Like people don't see you, people don't care about you unless you have your own voice. And I think that that addiction of the smartphone, of being constantly plugged in and always having, we've like killed boredom in many ways. You know, when you were a kid, you get bored, I don't know what to do, what do I do? We don't have that anymore. Now the kids can literally spend hours and hours a day on the phone and go down all kinds of rabbit holes that you never would have gone down of at their age if you didn't have the phone. Um, it's just this collective consciousness of information that everyone's perpetually plugged into, and everywhere you go, people are just obsessed with it. And I'm part of the problem. I'm probably contributing to it right now as a live streamer. But I'm also addicted to my phone. And, you know, I tried to be honest in my video that the iPhone 10 doesn't extinguish smartphone addiction. It just kind of forces me to be a little bit more careful. Like a couple times it's already happened the past week. I think it's been about a week since I switched to the iPhone 10, where I've realized, oh, my battery is low. The phone needs to charge. It didn't get me through the day. Sometimes the battery will be, depending on how much I'm using it, sometimes in the morning I'll use it a lot more than I expected. It'll be like 11:30 in the morning or close to noon, and the battery's at like 20%. And I'm like, well, I was going to use it a little bit more while the commercials were playing on TV, but now I'm not. And I'm going to do something else. You know, I'll just leave it charging. And it kind of has restructured my brain a few times to be like, oh, okay, that's like your inherent built-in screen time, because I tried the screen time features and stuff, and the, you know, decolorization of the screen and stuff, and that wasn't really working for me because it's so easy to just turn those off. And you know, you can easily work around the low battery thing too. You can just use it plugged in, but it requires more action, especially if you're out in the wild. If you're away from a charger, then you definitely got to be more careful, because you're like, okay, if this dies, then I can't talk to anybody, and now I'm not going to be able to keep in touch with the people I care about and that kind of thing. So it kind of has forced me to try to turn my phone into more of a tool, but I'm still very addicted to it, and I still have problems with it. Maybe the biggest factor is that my social circle consists of high school seniors who use it for assignments because they're burnt out. Yeah, that's a good theory, Burkhart. But yeah, it was kind of what I was talking about earlier with the chat GBTs. I feel like it's very useful if you're in school, because I bet teachers feel very threatened by it, and I bet students feel very excited by it. But in day to day, just like, how does this, you know, make money, like outside of a school system? What does this produce of value that people would be willing to pay for? I don't see that much. Maybe some auto news article writing, but that's about it. And we're kind of, that's not an expensive part of journalism. It's just like compiling facts and putting them into an article. Like most of the time, these articles, the reason people are reading less and less articles is because a lot of journalists are paid by the word. So they just repeat and restate the same things over and over and over again, which loses people's interest, and therefore they don't read as many articles, and they just follow the headlines, which is why apps like Twitter do so well. Let's see. GG super chatted. What random industry would benefit from an Apple product? Maybe a dedicated camera with AirDrop. Yes. Well, there's your answer, GG. That's I've been saying that for years, and I will continue to say that. There is so much overlap between the video and photography business and Mac buyers. There's so many people buying Macs that also buy cameras and use them for photos and videos all the time. I know so many photographers and videographers in my personal life that use their Macs for everything, because if you're a video editor, you cannot find a laptop better than a MacBook at processing video or exporting video or having all day battery life to use out in the field. There's just so many advantages to Apple hardware in that space. And Apple has incredible computational performance with their own custom silicon, and the only limiting factor really preventing them from making cinema grade cameras is they don't make, full size sensors. They don't make dedicated cameras. They just keep thinking, oh, the iPhone will get better. But until you're shooting Ted Lasso on an iPhone, Tim, you're not going to replace the need for dedicated cameras, which is why I think a Apple camera with AirDrop or a Find My support would also be cool. And biometrics and Apple Silicon baked in, and you could have Thunderbolt going straight into the Mac and have the footage going right off of the camera right into your Final Cut timeline, and all kinds of potential for that. And they just haven't done it, which is a shame. Let's see. Ethan, thank you for the super chat. You guys are far too generous today. Thank you. Had an iPhone 8 and upgraded to the 13. Even without ProMotion, I don't see any upgrade as truly justifiable, and nothing comes close to that upgrade. Yeah, I get what you mean, and I think that's a value. I think the problem is a lot of people in the tech community, and I'm guilty of this as well. I'm not trying to say I'm innocent, but a lot of the time in the tech community, we get really obsessed about certain techie features, like 120 hertz, or like ProRes video, or like Pro RAW cameras, and we hype that up in our heads, and we make videos about how much we care about that we convince people to buy things that they don't necessarily need. And if they wouldn't have watched our videos, or if they wouldn't have watched our content, there's a very real chance they could have kept using their old phone and been perfectly happy with it, and then they would have had extra money to put towards something hopefully more meaningful than just a phone upgrade. There's a concern I have that my obsession with Apple products and the way I've hyped them up over the years has influenced a lot of people's buying habits. And I know people have to make their own decisions, and I don't take sole responsibility for everything, but just knowing I could have been a negative influence on someone's finances, like if they hadn't have watched my videos, they may be in a better position in life. That was not sitting right with me, so that's what has, in more recent history, kind of influenced me to try to be a bit more focused on budgeting, buying secondhand, buying certified refurbished, or downgrading now to the iPhone 10 and seeing how long I can live off of it. I want to be a force for good, and if I do influence people's buying habits, I want it to be for the better, not for the worse. And when I first started doing tech YouTube, and when my channel first got off the ground, my mindset was kind of going against the grain because there was so much hate towards Apple, and there was not that many Apple focused channels. There was a couple, but not as many as there are now. So I was trying to be a voice that says it's okay to like Apple products. Apple products are cool, and you're not dumb and you're not stupid for liking Apple. But now I find the Tailosive Tech channel shifting a bit, and my narrative shifting a bit, because I feel like, well, now there's so many Apple channels, and now Apple's growing in sales, growing in market share, and the narrative has shifted. And I'm not saying it's all because of me. That's a lot of things, but there's definitely way more Apple channels now than there were before. And they've kind of mainstreamed it, and they've kind of normalized it to where now it doesn't feel like you have to defend Apple all that much. It's like I used to think of myself as the hardcore Apple sheep that would defend them all the time when most people were mad. And now I often find myself arguing with other Apple sheep that are defending them when I won't defend them. And I don't think I've really changed all that much. There's just always, from the beginning, been certain things I defend and certain things I don't. And there's just been a growing number of people. Now there's like 15 channels that will defend everything Apple does. So I'm not alone anymore. So I don't want to just be another voice in the echo chamber saying all the same things. I want to try to find my own perspective that's a good influence for you guys, that encourages you to be wiser and smarter, hopefully. So that's why I'm proud that there's people saying, yeah, I want to address my social media addiction, and I'm happy that there's people like Ethan that are saying, I don't see any upgrade as truly justifiable, and you got your 13 and you're happy with it, and you don't see any reason to upgrade it now. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. I hope you can hold on to your iPhone 13 for as long as possible. Um, let's see. I realized I had a problem when Apple started suggesting we leave the iPhone at home thanks to the Apple Watch. I wondered why the heck I would do that. Right. Okay. Why would I do that? The story about how unhealthy mobile phones are already going for 30 years. Yeah, different way though. It's like, I don't think people were worried that kids were on cell phones in the 1980s for the same reason we're 90s for the same reason we are now. Like how it's all still human issues, like humans seeking the approval of other humans in social circles, in even before the internet, in school, you wanted to be one of the cool kids, you wanted acceptance, and you didn't take judgment well, and you didn't take criticism well. But the internet is just kind of exponentially expanding human flaws, like want to be accepted. So now maybe like in the 90s, you wanted to be accepted in a group of 5 to 6 of the cool kids, and you wanted to be like them, so you would act like them, and hopefully they would welcome you into their group. Well, now with the internet, you can interact with hundreds of thousands of people all in a day. You want acceptance from thousands of people now instead of 5 or 6. So you're seeing one account get really popular because of their tweets or because of their videos or because of their TikToks, whatever it is, and you're like, well, I'm not as accepted as they are, so that means no one cares about me. I'm not as important. So, it's like progressively worse, I think, at higher volume. It's still, there are problems that still existed, but they're just magnified now because of the internet, and they're so accessible. Like you would be worried about what people think of you, and you would want to be really careful about what you said and how you looked compared to what the other people in your school thought back in the 90s. Whereas now, you still have school. Let's not forget that. There's still people going to schools. But on top of that, you can be connected at all times. It's no longer just, okay, when I'm at school, I hope they think I look nice, or I sound funny or whatever. But now it's like, oh, if I'm not posting, if I'm not saying things, if I'm not online and active every day, even on weekends, even on vacation, even at late at night, even early in the morning, if I'm not constantly active, I'm not of value, or people don't care enough about me, or, it affects your self-esteem. It affects your confidence. It affects how you think of yourself based on what other people say about you. Yeah, it's, yeah. So like $1 Snake says, social media is designed to be addictive. That's like inherently, like every social media app is asking the same question when you open it. How do we convince you to not leave? As soon as you open Twitter, the goal is to convince the user to not close Twitter. As soon as you open YouTube, convince the user not to close YouTube. Open TikTok, don't close TikTok. All of them are inherently trying to get your eyes on their platform as long as physically possible. And that involves a lot of throwing short form things, or how quickly can we grab your attention, or how quickly can we say something thought-provoking or do something thought-provoking. And they reward channels that, or accounts that capture your attention best. And there's a lot of issues with that, which is why I'm not too obsessed with, the growth of my channels. I don't really care if they lose subscribers, or I don't really care if videos don't perform all that well, because I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's the algorithm I want to feed into. You gotta, it's a delicate balance, because you can't make videos hoping no one watches them, because then what's the point? And you can't really make a living off that either. Ian says, will you remember me when you have 1 million subs? Well, I'll probably never have 1 million subs, and I'm okay with that, Ian. But if you want me to remember you, I'd recommend having a profile picture and something a bit more noteworthy. Because that really helps me remember people, is their profile picture. Like Michael Burkhart has had the same profile picture for a long time, and so has Yi Hirasawa, even though it's not really their face. And Zen has been in the chat for a while and asking good questions, and they're not spamming, so I'm not like annoyed, and they're just being genuine. So that's probably the best way uh, to make yourself memorable, rather than just asking, "Will I remember you?" Using an older smartphone is definitely a better option to combat smartphone addiction compared to ditching the smartphone entirely. Harm reduction is the best method of getting rid of addiction. Yeah, and I think it's too crucial in our culture now. Like we can't go back to not having them. That's the difference between like smartphones and cigarettes. Is I think that they both are potentially as damaging, just in different ways. Cigarettes a bit more physically damaging, and smartphones a bit more mentally damaging. But we're not going to ban smartphones. We're not going to have no smartphone use zones. Like even in the classroom now, they want kids using their phones more and more for different uses, and different companies. Everybody has to have an app, and everyone has to have an account, and my phone is my car key now. It's like I control my car with my phone, and they are useful. Having a camera, having directions, having a way to contact people. They're needed enough that we can't just abandon them, and that's what makes it so addicting. It's kind of why I think one of the biggest issues the country is facing is with when it comes to diet and food. And I'm also guilty of this. Again, I'm not saying this as I have figured out how to eat healthy. No, I haven't. I still struggle with this. But like it's very difficult to convince people to not eat so much, because you can't really cut out food entirely. Same way you can't cut out smartphones entirely. You got to eat something, and it's the same thing kind of with smartphones. It's like you got to use something for texting, for pictures, for communicating. There's so much of our culture that just needs the boarding passes, for the smartphone, or you needs the email, for work. Like there's so many things that the phone is used for that we can't cut it out cold turkey. But it's I don't think it's really looked at as that big of an issue, but I think over time it's mostly just on how I've seen it change me. There's been certain life plans I've made, or certain uh you know goals I've wanted to hit, or things that have affected my mood so drastically, just because I was on my smartphone for a bit longer than I probably should have been. That it's affected my mood, it's affected my plans, and I'm like, it really gets your hooks in you, because it's kind of like the possibilities are endless, both good and bad with the smartphone. And I think when we talk about flagships in the iPhone 14 and the 15 series, we're talking about what the good potentials are. How good can the battery get? Having USB-C, how much easier, how much faster can this charge? We in the tech community like highlighting all of the great perks of how good can phones get. But I don't think we've really explored how negative these phones can get, having especially young kids that are connected online with total strangers, and how many problems that's caused. But again, it's not really the technology that's the problem. It's a human problem that's magnified by technology. This is why I'm such a big fan of Black Mirror. Is that, at least the earlier seasons of Black Mirror, I didn't really like the last couple seasons, but the earlier seasons of Black Mirror mostly were highlighting how technology magnifies human errors, human issues, and I relate to that a lot. I see that in my personal life, and um, it's not just tech addiction in children though. Like that's a part of it, but I think tech addiction or smartphone addiction is an increasingly large problem affecting adults too, and the elderly, and young adults, and 20s, to everybody. I think it's damaging to everybody, not just kids. Thank you for the super chat, Zen. Interesting point about phones. They are the central focus of everyday lives. If lithium gets scarce, I wonder what will happen. Well, the good news is lithium is really not that scarce. It's just kind of complicated to mine it, but there's a ton of lithium in the ocean that we haven't really tapped into. And when there's demand, there's a will, and when there's a will, there's a way. There's ways to extract lithium, and we know how to recycle lithium pretty effectively. So I don't think we're going to have any shortage of lithium. The fact that Apple has, they said on their last earnings call, I think they have over 2 billion active Apple devices now. So I think there's a very large percentage of iPhone users that happen to have another Apple device, whether it's a watch or a. So someone like me has a watch, laptop, iMac, phone, iPad. So I count as like five of those devices. But I think Apple said that there's in a previous earnings call that they're at over 1 billion iPhone users. So that gives you perspective on how much better the iPhone sells than pretty much every other phone, or better than any other Apple product. The iPhone is just way, way in ahead. And iPhone is not even the majority of the market. We've got millions and hundreds of millions of other Android phones all over the world. So there may be lithium shortages when it comes to electric vehicle production or stabilizing the grid, but I don't think we're going to have an issue with making sure that every human being on the planet has a smartphone. We're nearly there. I think we're at like probably, I think 3.5 billion have internet access. The other 3.5 billion don't, but it's not from shortage of lithium. There's other reasons that the other half of humanity doesn't have phones, and it's a lot of corruption and politics and uh, where they are located. It's not from a lack of lithium. Let's see. There's a feature on the YouTube app that allows you to set a timer for when you should take a break from using that app. I doubt anyone uses that feature. Yeah, I know. It's kind of my point. Is like, well, you can bake in those features, but if humans were responsible enough to set up the timer thing, they wouldn't need the timer thing. That's the point. That's why it's kind of funny to me. Is like, oh, we'll build in software features so people don't use their phone as much. It's like, well, to set those up and honor them, because even if you set up a timer in screen time or whatever, you can bypass those. Maybe the kids can't. Maybe you set one up for your kid and you put in a passcode and the kid doesn't know it. But that's just a small way to delay the problem. If the kid really wants and really enjoys using the phone and playing games and watching YouTube, when they get older, they're going to turn off that limit and use it just like their parents do. Um, I almost wouldn't be surprised. I remember talking with someone about this, a friend of mine, that they had designed a game. There's a game that was made in China that they literally had to put rules on how engaging the game was or how fun the game was, because they were worried about how addictive it was. And of course, the Chinese government has all this control and they're quick to act on things, and that's a good thing for certain situations and a bad thing for others. But it kind of presented the idea in my brain that, like, well, maybe in the future, just like how we have rules about smoking and stuff, we might come to a point where we have rule like federal mandates about screen time where you can no longer bypass it as easily. I don't know. I don't know. Like, maybe not in the U.S., but governments that want more control are more concerned about smartphone addiction. But I don't think it'll be just with kids. Um, yeah, I think we'll have enough phones for everybody, unfortunately. I mean, it's a good thing for more people to be connected. And I should acknowledge there's a lot of great benefits that we've gained from the internet. I love my job, and I love that I get to talk to you guys about this stuff. And I love that we get to learn and we get to understand where to save money, how to save money. And there's a lot of great resources and a lot of job opportunities that have opened up purely because of the internet's existence. And there's a lot of good things that have come from it too. Um, so it's important to highlight the pros and cons, I guess. Nothing's that black and white, I guess. Let's see. I wish YouTube, Instagram, etc. were forced to let users turn off their algorithms completely to make them entirely search based. Would be way healthier, in my opinion. It'd probably be mentally healthier, but I don't think it would be financially healthier for the company, which, okay, maybe that's damaging to mental health, but the point of the company is to make money, right? That gets into a ethically, morally difficult conversation, because it's like, say you run an ice cream shop, or you're Ben and Jerry's or whatever, and someone just keeps eating ice cream over and over and over again, like, and it's bad for them and they should stop eating it. Well, should Ben and Jerry or the ice cream shop be legally forced to not sell that person ice cream, or should we just try to convince that person to take better care of themselves? Most would probably say the latter, but I don't know. Maybe others would say the former. Um, Do you think eventually every search engine will incorporate an AI chatbot to their platform? I don't personally. I don't think it's as intuitive. I think search results seem to be what took off. I don't think having a fake personality on the other end is really what uh, would perform better. I think it's cool, but it's mostly interesting for students and teachers. But I don't. I think most people, if you're searching for the answer on something, would rather just have the search results show up and then a link or a picture to follow along with it, rather than a bot. But I could be wrong. Maybe more and more people start to get used to that. I don't know what the different what's the difference between an AI chatbot and a digital assistant. I think the lines are kind of blurred there. Um, did we lose our soul regarding privacy? Who? I think that's a good question, Marcelo. I think mankind ultimately will decide that convenience is more valuable than privacy, and we've kind of already admitted that. You think back in the 1930s, people would have been on board with the idea of having a little device with a microphone and internet access that you leave plugged in at all times. Now we buy that stuff and we fill our house with it, and all of us have microphones attached to us at all times that are connected, and anyone really could be listening. And we'd like to think that they're encrypted and private, but we really don't have a firm grasp on how private they are. Um, and ultimately the companies that don't focus on privacy usually are able to use that data and sell it, which means that they sell hardware for cheaper, which means that people can get it for cheaper, and typically the um, software or the AI or whatever you want to call it, the digital assistant, will be much smarter if it doesn't have as big an emphasis on privacy. Um, so it's honorable when companies fight for it, but I don't think we're going to win that battle. I'm pretty sure we've kind of already lost that battle, and we'll probably lose it harder in years to come, based on off the record conversations I've had with people about privacy and how much can the government really see and what's hackable and what's not hackable, and um, it's pretty hopeless. Unfortunately, from what I understand, especially now with like iPhone 14s and 15s getting like the satellite communication stuff. Like you could be in the middle of Antarctica, and as long as your phone has a charge, it's still technically able to connect to the internet. And it's like, wow. Um, there's really it's very difficult to be completely unplugged, really, especially now that batteries are soldered into phones. And when phones die, they're not actually dead. That's why Find My still works, um, at least for a while. I feel like if they made it a law, you can't bypass screen time, people just won't set it up. Well, no, if it was a law, you wouldn't have a choice to set it up. I think that was the point. We carry little magic boxes in our pockets that have answers to most of life's questions. Yeah, but I don't think that's changed in the past 5 to 10 years. I mean, 10 years ago, you could pretty much look up anything. The way we present it in the search results has probably gotten a little bit more refined, but I don't think Chat GBT really changes the search algorithm all that much. Already, that's how Google works. You just search something and it gives you the most curated results, and you can scroll down for more if you want. But yeah, um, it's not going anywhere. I feel like we're experiencing the effects of that now. Chat GBT and AI bots or whatever aren't really changing all that much. The two Apple products I'm most excited for are iPhone 15 and M3 MacBook Air, because the upgrades are decent. I'll probably get them eventually. Unfortunately, I've got some sad news on that, because there was a more recent report that dropped the day after I posted my video claiming that the M2 MacBook, the 15-inch MacBook Air is going to be M2. So, of course, they were very quick to make my entire video dated. But yeah, I'm with you there. 15-inch MacBook Air, I don't know what chip it's going to get in it. M2 15-inch Air doesn't make a lot of sense in my head, but that's what the reports are. Some reports, I forget who it was. Was it Quo? I'd be sad if it was Quo, because Quo's usually right. Um, Let me find the article real quick. I read it this morning. It's just more reason. according to China. No, it was Digitimes. Okay, well, Digitimes is not super accurate, so hopefully, um, they're wrong on that one, and we actually get M3 chip in the MacBook Air makes so much more sense in my head. Doing an M2 15-inch Air in like April just doesn't sound like they already released the M2 Air in June, so to wait like 10 months and then do another M2 Air, that's just bizarre. So I hope that report is wrong, but that's at least what the news is saying today. But yeah, I think at least for me as a techie guy that's interested in what tech companies are doing and what they prioritize and stuff, the transition away from Lightning is a pretty interesting one because the iPhone charge port does not change every year. In fact, it's only changed once. Can you believe that? We've had iPhones for over 15 years now, and they've only changed the charge port once. So if this is the second time, that's a pretty big deal. Even if it's a connector we already have, and maybe the speeds aren't that different, or the charging speed isn't that much faster. But even so, just Apple admitting to using the same connector on their phone that Android uses, and having one cable for your Mac, iPad, phone. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Um, let's see. Whenever I have a conversation of said restaurant and an ad of said restaurant comes up on my Twitter. Yeah, I noticed that. Have you guys picked up on that? I'll notice things like I'll say something passively and then the movie will show up. Like, what was the one happening recently? I can't tell if it was because of a search algorithm or something, but I had a conversation with my wife about Michael Shannon because we went to a Super Bowl party. I don't care about the Super Bowl, but I like the food, and we got a lot of food to eat. And most of the people at the party didn't really care about the game anyway. It's just a good excuse to get together and eat good food, but not too much. I eat too much. But we saw the trailer for The Flash, and I don't really care about The Flash, but I was interested in Michael Keaton as Batman again, and seeing Michael Shannon play General Zod again. And we were talking about the movie, and then when I got home that night, I got YouTube recommended videos of, or not that night, the next day I got YouTube recommendations of like Michael Shannon stuff, and I was like, oh, that's awfully convenient. Could just be a coincidence because maybe more people were searching for it after the Super Bowl commercial, so they were like, hey, this video's on the rise, let's push it to Drew, maybe he'll like it or something like that. But I've definitely noticed times where you like are thinking about something or having a conversation and then it shows up and you're like, hey, how did you know that? Marquez has tweeted about that too. Like, Facebook just already knows everything you've dreamed about for the past week and puts ads in them of those things. Is it possible that they don't release the M3 chip until the end of this year or even early next year? Well, it's all rumor territory at this point, so anything's possible, but there's multiple outlets claiming that the 15-inch MacBook Air will be ready before June, or at June at least. And I think the 15-inch Air should get an M3 chip. It just makes so little sense to me to release it all this time later and still have an M2, but it could be right. It could go either way at this point, so... If you're asking about rumors saying is it possible, of course, but yeah. I am using my iPhone as a camera, but I'm not using continuity camera. Just a little fun fact, the iPhone 10 did not get continuity camera support because, I don't know, Apple decided the A11 chip was too old for that, but I'm using an app called Webcam Plus. There's a Mac/iOS app called Webcam Plus, and it lets you turn your iPhone camera into a webcam. So that's what I'm doing right now. So, okay, Apple tried to feature restrict me out of the iPhone 10, but I found a cheap, quick little workaround. It didn't cost me anything, actually. It only works via wired, though. I have to keep the phone plugged in. I don't know if, actually it might work wireless. I haven't tried it. Maybe there's a way to do it, or maybe there's a paid way to do it wirelessly, but yeah. It lets me capture it at full 4K though, which is kind of cool. I don't stream at 4K because YouTube doesn't do a very good job at streaming in 4K, and you can't really tell the difference anyway because it's a smartphone camera, but Webcam Plus gives me a lot more control over the the resolution and frame rate. Continuity camera doesn't give you any control. You don't even really know if it's doing it wirelessly or wired. Even when you plug it in, you can't really tell which way it's working. I totally forgot you went from your 13 Pro to the 10. See? Eric Gonzalez. Can't even tell. There you go. Thank you for your support, Dovinus and Alpha. How was Valentine's Day? Did you and Louise get any gifts? It's kind of a crazy time for us right now because Louise's birthday is before Valentine's Day, and then my birthday is after Valentine's Day. So, like, we're both trying to, give each other things or celebrate. And then Valentine's Day is right in the middle. So we're like, oh, okay, what do we do for that? So no, we didn't get any like specific gifts, but we're not, there's 5 different love languages and stuff. We weren't big on like physical gifts at this stage in our marriage. Like I asked Louise what she wanted for her birthday, and she was like, I just want you to cook me a nice meal. And we were in Florida at the time. I did check out Tailosive Life if you want more coverage of that kind of stuff. But I made her, I cooked her a steak and potatoes and mushrooms and brought it out to her, and we had a nice meal, had a nice view. That's what she wanted, so that's what she got. And she's asking me what I want for my birthday, and basically it's just I want to spend some time with her, so I apologize in advance. I'll probably not be working at all this Friday because it's my birthday, and I've been making a lot of videos and trying to make time for all these interviews and podcasts and streams and stuff. And I would just like a day to just not think about all that. So on the spirit of good mental health and digital wellness features, I will not be working this Friday. So don't expect any videos or streams to go up on Friday. But yeah, the Valentine's Day, we just went for a walk and we spent the morning together, and it was good. We like quality time. We've got enough stuff. There's actually a lot of stuff I have that I want to get rid of. But yeah, we got to find places for them, find which things we can sell, which things to donate, which things to throw out. And I don't want more like gifts. I don't want more like physical things other than the gift of time or, gift of food you got to eat. So yeah. Alpha says, how's not having 120 hertz? I also have continuity camera on my 10s Max. Oh, well, good for you. That's right. The A12 chip was new enough to get continuity camera. So if I had a 10s, I could do it, but 10 was too old. I guess there was that big a difference between the A11 and the A12 chip. But yeah, it's been fine. I still notice it, but I turned off, like I said in my video, I turned off 120 hertz early to mid-January. So I was prepared. Moving to the iPhone 10, I didn't really go, oh my God, it's 60 hertz, because my 13 Pro was on 60 hertz for 2 to 3 weeks before I made the switch. And it was very jarring. It was very distracting, and every time I used the phone, I noticed it, and it bothered me. But that was kind of the point, because I wanted to use my phone less, and I wanted to spend less time on it. So it was an intentional roadblock. And when I use my MacBook or when I use my iPad, they still have 120 hertz because I like 120 hertz, don't get me wrong, and I do notice it and I appreciate it, but I'm not addicted to those things. I don't have my iPad on me at all times or my MacBook. So when I'm working, it's nice to have a display that's that high refresh rate. But the phone is what I was addicted to. The phone is what my hand was gravitating toward. The phone is in my pocket all the time. And I just figured, you know what? Like when you're out and about, most of your screens are 60 hertz anyway. Like my Apple Watch is 60 hertz. My display in my car is 60 hertz. So we just have refresh rate symmetry now. And I used to put a big priority on 120, but now I'm like, you know what? I don't want to box myself into that feature anymore. And I want to learn to live without it and be happy with it. And it took several weeks of getting used to the phone being 60 hertz, but I did eventually start to not really care as much. Like the first 2 weeks of no 120 hertz on my phone, I was annoyed by it. I was very tempted to turn it back on several times, but I just resisted, and I was like, yeah, it's okay. You can live. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. Elizabeth said, what would the price be for the 15-inch MacBook Air? So there's a lot of debate in the tech community on that one. We keep going back and forth. I think it'll be more expensive than what most people want because, we could do a poll on that, actually. That might be fun. Okay, well, in the first poll, seems like most people have already given up on the headset. Less than 30% say never say never. 23% says if it's not out by the end of the year, let's give up. So that means more than half of you guys will have given up on the idea if it's not done by then. Um, the universe continue to bring you lots of new ideas for awesome content. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. How does the MacBook Pro webcam compare to the iPhone 10 as a webcam? Personally, I think the iPhone 10 still looks better. I mean, I can switch it back here. Okay, so this is the iPhone 10 you're looking at me on right now. I'm going to switch it to FaceTime. Oh, wait, wrong preset. There we go. It's not a bad... Oh, it's shrunk. Wait, one sec. There we go. It's not a bad webcam, but it's more the angle than anything. I kind of like having the camera up higher. But yeah, YouTube kind of compresses it anyway, so it doesn't really make a huge difference. But I just like knowing that I can move the camera around and keep it up here. I think the 15-inch Air, Burkhart says, I think the 15-inch Air will be $1,700, but it'll start with 512 gig and the 10-core GPU. It's an interesting theory. I don't know if that market cares that much about the storage. I feel like if you're going for an Air and not a Pro, it's because you're using it for more light tasks. So, yeah, I feel like that's not a bad assumption, 1700. I just think it's going to be like most... Like, I don't think most people were guessing the MacBook Air was going to be $1,200, and it did. And it was still 256 gigs, and the read and write speed was lower. So there's always been this just, like, blanket of... Ugh. Like, this blanket of... They compromised the product in some way by making it more manufacturable, or they priced it a little higher than I wanted, especially with this updated MacBook Air, which is why I personally think that the 15-inch Air will be $1,800, purely just because if it's a good deal, because what Burkhart described, in my opinion, would be a pretty decent deal. $1,700 with 512 gigs of storage for a 15-inch MacBook. That's not bad, especially if it came with the 10-core GPU. That's a pretty decent bargain, which is why I don't think they would do it. I think that by introducing a cheaper, smaller screen, you are encouraging more people to not buy a 16-inch MacBook Pro. So right now, if you want a MacBook bigger than 14 inches, you got to spend $2,500. So if you're introducing a cheaper model, you kind of have to spec it carefully. And again, Tim Cook's very good with this decoy effect, and I feel similarly about the 15-inch MacBook Air. So my guess is it's going to be $1,800, and I know that sounds a little bit higher than what most people would be comfortable with. I would still expect it to be 256 gigs of storage, and then we'll have something to complain about. But I would just rather lean on the side of caution. I would rather assume it's going to be worse. It'd essentially be $200 more than the 13-inch Air with the same specs. I feel like they'd have to upgrade the speakers on it, though. The speakers on the M2 Air are not very good, and on a larger size MacBook, they would probably beef up the speakers a bit. The way I'd make the logic work is like, okay, there's a $800 difference between the M2 MacBook Air and the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So if there's like roughly an $800 difference between the 16-inch MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, that would correlate to about $1,700, maybe $1,800. Having it be $1,700 with extra storage GPU is a way to have the price be higher while having a pretty much huge margin for Apple. I think they can still keep the storage low and charge that much. They can have the price. You don't need the specs to be high for the price to be high. That's how I see it. Apple doesn't need to justify themselves. They're Apple. Come on now. Hopefully you're right though. That would be a much better deal, what you're describing. Because I feel like if you ship it with 512 gigs of storage, you basically kill the idea of that many people speccing it up. I don't think that many people would spec it up if it was 512 gigs, and Apple would rather you spec it up. Do we think the MacBook Air 15-inch will replace the MacBook Pro 13-inch? Oh, I would like it if it did. I didn't think about that. We still haven't really talked much about the Touch Bar MacBook Pro and how it's still sitting there, but I don't know. I think it's just a good entry-level MacBook Pro model. MacBook Air with M1 will stay in the lineup until such a time they can offer another MacBook Air at $1,000. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I don't think Apple really cares that much about what they charge, even if it's a bad deal. There's a lot of products in the lineup that I think are just there to make other products look good. It just increases the sales of the newer product. That's its job. Um, I think they can get you to spend more without giving you 512 gigs. If the price difference between 14-inch and 16-inch is $500, then 13-inch and 15-inch will extrapolate to $1,800. I guess that's kind of my logic. There's a $500 difference there, and I do think that because it's bigger and it will probably have a better battery life, that will encourage them to increase the price quite a bit. Um, let's see. TA Tech says, I missed the beginning of the stream. What have I missed? Oh, nothing. We just talk about the world and culture and humanity and Apple reality because it's a better reality than the one we're in. I think that the price kind of makes or break the products because obviously if we're both wrong and the 15-inch Air starts at like wait, Alpha, where did you hear the difference between the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro is $200? They're $500 difference. I don't know how you got that. The 16-inch MacBook Pro is $2,500 and the 14-inch MacBook Pro is $2,000. But yeah, I feel like if you were right though, and it was a $1,400 MacBook, that would sell really well, and that would probably do really well. But I just don't think it's going to be that cheap, especially with MacBook screens are usually the most expensive part. But I think they'll beef up the speakers a little bit, and they'll give it a bigger battery at that size. If you equally spec the two, the difference is $200. Yeah, but that doesn't change the starting price. We're not. Maybe the difference between the 15-inch Air and the 13-inch Air will be a difference of $200 when equally spec'd, but the starting specs could be totally different. How is my mother liking the 13 Pro Max? She's loving it so far. I asked her how it was going, and she said that it was a little bit jarring to get used to the size. And I asked her because I hadn't posted the video yet. I was still using the iPhone 10. It was like the second or third day she had switched over. And I was like, hey, if it's too big, if it's too bulky for you, I can switch it back. It's not a problem. You know, like I don't mind resetting the devices. Like I'll switch back to the 13 Pro if you want. And she was like, no, I like it. I want to keep it. She especially likes having the screen so big and so bright because, you know, when you get older, your eyesight isn't as good. So she can read information off the screen a lot easier, and the battery life is way better. Camera's way better. So she's loving it so far. Thank you for asking, Caleb. I think that was her only complaint, was that it is kind of heavy because she uses a case on her phone and I don't. So she got a case I didn't have a case for her. I would have given her one if I had it, but she put a case on the 13 Pro Max, and it's a big brick of a phone. No, she didn't. I was showing off the camera features, but you guys all think people care about their tech way more than they really do. I just showed her. It's like, see, you can do macro mode and ultra wide, and she's like, okay, great. You know, it's like people just do not care. They don't care. Pretty much the biggest thing she noticed and wanted was just the bigger screen and the longer battery. She did not really care much about the camera at all, but. She knows it's better. She knows it's a better camera, at least. Let's see. The 14-inch MacBook Air is really 14.5 or something, so it's $200 more for just faster chip and display. Definitely just trying to get you to the Pro. I don't know what you're talking about. There's not a 14-inch Air. Maybe the 15-inch Air is 14.5. But I wouldn't be shocked, Unreal Cousins, if... Apple's goal with the 15-inch MacBook Air is to be not that great a deal so that you feel more inclined to get the Pro. because that's how I felt about the M2 MacBook Air, and I felt like that was the big narrative of the YouTube community. Most people were just like, yeah, it's pretty good, but once you spec it up, it's so close to the price of a Pro, you should just get a Pro. I feel like that will be the goal similarly with the 15-inch Air. They'll be like, yeah, it's pretty good, but once you spec it up, it's very close to the price of the 16-inch Pro, and that's so much better. Um, so that's my guess, is that it sounds too good to be true, and I'd rather be wrong and have it be a better deal than I think than hope that it's a good deal and end up being wrong. So it's just a defense mechanism. As someone that's been following Apple and covering the leaks and covering the rumors and watching the prices get revealed, I don't think anyone anticipated the studio display would be $1,600. I think if you would have pushed the rumor that, okay, Apple's gonna make a 5K iMac but without the computer and just sell the display, how much would that cost? Most people would have said, maybe 1,300, maybe 1,400, and then it ended up being 1,600 and then 2,000 if you want the height adjustable stand and all that. So yeah, there's sometimes Apple surprises us and prices things lower than we expect, but most of the time that's not how it goes. And I think it's more dangerous to assume it will be cheaper than it ends up being. I just don't want to set false expectations. So I'm going to assume 1,800, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. If it ends up being 1,600 or 1,700, I'll be surprised. I'll be like, okay, cool, good. That's a good price. But 1,800 is what I expect. If it's more than 1,800, I'll be very disappointed. That's for sure. Let's see. Here. 14 Plus is not a good deal. Please do not buy it. I'm coming from my 12 Pro Max to a 14 Pro Max, and I can tell the difference on the camera quality. Well, of course you can. You watch tech videos. If you're watching this live stream, you're more inclined to care about those kinds of things. But if you're grandma that is posting most of their pictures and videos on Facebook, you're not going to care. Trust me, you're not going to care. Margel says, would you still have switched phones with your mom if she had an iPhone older than the 10, like an iPhone 8 or 7? Maybe. I was debating because I knew I wanted to downgrade for a while, ever since December, and the more often I was picking up my sister's phone or my wife's phone and realizing, man, I really miss this rounded chassis. That's why back in December, I think I made the tweet about the iPhone XR, and I was like, you know what, that design was that was cool. I really like that rounded aluminum design, and I was like, my mom's been asking me for over 6 months, like, just let me know when you upgrade your phone because I want your old one. And so we were talking about it for a while, but I had decided because my mom was going to visit this month. She's visiting now in February. We're going to see her on my birthday. Yay. She decided that, like, yeah, you can, we'll just swap phones basically. But I had the backup plan that, okay, if mom doesn't want my phone or decides that the 13 Pro Max is too big and she wants something else, I was debating switching with my wife as a backup, just because the iPhone SE2 is not that different from the SE3, and you can find them from real cheap. So it would kind of go in line with the same goal of, I want to review older tech because that's what more people are using, and I honestly really like the look of the silver, or the white, whatever they call it. The white iPhone SE2 is a very clean phone. It's got the centered Apple logo, one tiny little camera bump, but it's from 2020, so it still supports eSIM, so I could switch between that and the 15 Pro without a physical SIM. Whereas because I got the iPhone 10, I had to get a physical SIM again. Thankfully, Mint hooked me up with that after hours of asking, but they finally made it work. But yeah, I don't know if I would have. I think wireless charging was something I wasn't quite ready to budge on. Honestly, I feel like me and my wife were sharing the 13 Pro Max all the time because You know, when my wife is like updating our budget tracker or our spreadsheets, she often wants to look at the Apple Card transactions. So she'll just be like, can I look at your phone? Or if she wants to take a nice picture, she knew that the 13 Pro Max had the better camera. So she would grab my phone to take pictures and videos. So I was like, it would be kind of a cop out way of saying I downgraded, but I could have technically said, okay, I'm on the SE2, but then I'm with my wife all the time. We travel together, we go everywhere together. So I would still have access to the 13 Pro Max whenever I felt like it. If I wanted to take a video or take a macro shot or an ultra wide shot or a night mode shot, my wife could just take it instead. Um, but I didn't want that felt like kind of cheating to just be like, well, my wife has the 13 Pro now, I don't use it anymore. It's like, but if I ever need anything from a new iPhone, I just grab her phone real quick. We both kind of grab each other's phones back and forth and stuff. So I didn't want to do that, but I thought it would be a good backup option just to show like I can live with an SE2 if need be. But the main reason I didn't want to compromise much on wireless charging is just because I wirelessly charge still, even though I don't have MagSafe. This charges my iPhone 10 every night, and I have a wireless charger in my car. And I love the new car we got last year, and I plan on keeping that car for potentially decades. I have no clear path to replacing that. And even if I did replace that car in the future, I'm sure that the replacement car would still have wireless charging. So the simplicity of just being able to get in the car and drop my phone on a wireless charger and it charges makes me so much more comfortable with weak battery life, because I know the iPhone 10 I have has very weak battery. But because it can wirelessly charge, I can drop it in the car and it'll be topped off as I'm driving around town or running errands or on a road trip, which is normally when I would kill my iPhone battery the fastest, is when I was like using it for maps or something. But with the new car, we don't, it has maps built into it and everything. So basically, because of my workflow, and I work from home most of the time, and typically when I'm working with my phone or whatever, I have my MacBook, which is a huge battery bank, and I can charge my phone with my MacBook like I am right now. So I wasn't really concerned with battery life all that much, but I knew that keeping the phone charged was going to be way more complicated if I bought or I downgraded to a phone that didn't have wireless charging. So if I got an iPhone 7, okay, now I have to get a dedicated lightning cable just for the car, and now I have to charge my phone via the lightning connector every time I go to bed. There's not just a MagSafe or wireless charging option as a backup. So I could live without it for sure, but I felt like iPhone 10 was kind of perfect because, for one, it was the iPhone 10 my mom had was the iPhone 10 that I unboxed on this channel all those years ago. And I felt like that was where my channel got a lot of its growth, a lot of its beginnings. That's like where it started. And it's, to me, like the biggest iPhone upgrade of all time, which is why it was kind of the perfect downgrade, because I felt like it would feel like the smallest amount of changes, and yet the oldest phone I could go back to and feel like not much has changed. So if the goal of the downgrade was to show that old phones can be just as good or pretty good compared to the new phones, iPhone 10 was a good example because it's OLED, it's Face ID, it's got portrait mode on both sides, it's got the wireless charging, still runs iOS 16, and it'll probably run iOS 17. So I thought it was just such a perfect old phone, especially because I know you can buy them for like $200. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe if I downgraded to an iPhone 7, I could make the argument, all right, this one's $150 instead of $200. But there's so many differences between those phones. Whereas the number of differences, honestly, between the iPhone 10 and my 13, they're there. I'm not denying them, but the overall way you use the phone with gestures and everything was not ultimately that different. And yeah, just like Aaron Gonzalez says, that's when I started watching your videos, when the iPhone 10 was coming out. That was such a pivotal, such a giant fundamental shift in smartphone design for Apple. And it was such a big year, such a big upgrade, that I felt like, yeah, this is something I want to return to, something I want to go back to. And I didn't want to give up wireless charging. And I don't feel that way about the home button. I don't need Touch ID. I don't really love Touch ID, but at the same time, I'm not against maybe reviewing a iPhone SE 2 or something like that. Maybe in the future, if I want to swap phones with my wife, now that we both have pretty old phones or something. Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy with where I am, so I'm going to keep using it. I don't have some year-long plan of on this month I will upgrade to this phone, and then on this month I will upgrade to that. I don't got a schedule. I'm just using it, and if it becomes problematic or I run into huge issues, then I will change it up. But I'll let you guys know as soon as I do. Um, let's see. It's very fitting how after all the years of growth you had with your channel and letting go of the iPhone 10, it managed to make its way back to you. Yeah. There's a bit of nostalgia to it. I agree, Marngel. You were fine with the 12 mini, which wasn't famous for battery life. That's true. But the iPhone 10 I have now definitely, I can attest, has much worse battery life than the 12 mini I had. But the point is, with my lifestyle, where I work and where I use my phone, I'm not away from a charger for extended periods, so I'm not really worried about that. Um, does she use any of the MagSafe accessories? Um, well, I wasn't willing to give up my MagSafe Duo because I do use it every day to charge my Apple Watch, which my Apple Watch is still here. That hasn't changed. But I didn't have any other. I don't have a MagSafe battery pack. I don't have a MagSafe wallet, so maybe she'll get some kind of MagSafe accessory. But as far as I'm aware, she doesn't really care or need any of those. Um, the daylight photos in well-lit areas are surprisingly are usurpingly small for having a sensor that's over 2 times smaller. What are you trying to say? What are your thoughts on the MacBook Pro after many months of usage? It's still great. I still love it. Still my favorite Apple product. I have the least amount of wishes slash like things I would change about it. Obviously, every Apple product, there's little things you might want changed. But as far as all the Apple products in my ecosystem or any Apple product I've used, even reviewed, like even talking about the Studio Display, even talking about the Mac Studio, all of those things, the MacBook Pro I would change the least about. I'm very happy with it, and it still works very reliably. I'm using it right now. Love the microphones, love the display, love the speed, love the battery. It's just overall fantastic purchase. But to be clear, I wouldn't buy this same spec again. Like if this MacBook Pro was stolen or damaged or lost, I would probably try as a challenge to see how cheap of a MacBook I could get to replace it. And I am using all three USB-C cables, USB-C ports right now. So I don't think I could go with an Air or a Pro, but or sorry, not a 13-inch Pro, but I would probably try to get like a certified refurbished silver. Maybe I don't know if I'd go 14-inch because I really do like having the bigger screen, but I'd probably go with like a silver 16-inch MacBook Pro with a binned M1 Pro chip. It's like, okay, I've experienced the M1 Max. So if I was forced to get rid of this MacBook Pro and replace it, I would probably try to get by with a binned M1 Pro and see if I could notice the difference. Because I'm betting it would still be pretty dang fast. What storage did I have on my iPhone 10? Aha, see, I don't know if we've talked about that yet, but it's still 256. So that's one perk, I guess. I went from a 13 Pro Max, which had 256 gigs of storage, to an iPhone 10 with 256 gigs of storage. So I didn't have to delete anything. I knew it would all fit. Why is the description of your best smartphone review video talk about the Pixel 2? We talked about that way back in the day. It's kind of a funny story, but at the time I was posting videos and we were talking about the iPhone 10, we were going through the adpocalypse. And YouTube was demonetizing content left and right for no reason at all. There was no process. They would demonetize your video, even if it was perfectly clean. I've still to this day never uploaded a single video or live stream to this channel that was rightfully demonetized. Every single time a video gets demonetized, I would hit manual review, and then later on they would approve it and say, actually, yeah, you're right, this is safe for advertisers. Every single time they said I was in the right. And when I wasn't even, I think there's old tweets about this you can find, but back then in I think November of 2017, the video wasn't even done uploading. It was I was uploading my iPhone 10 review and it was 30% of the way done and it was already demonetized. I was like, okay, you're demonetizing for, like, you don't even know what the video's about. You can't even see the video yet. So just, I think the theory was because I put iPhone 10 review or something, because I was doing unboxings and talking about the iPhone 10 and stuff. And anytime I put iPhone 10 in the title, I think this happened to Marquez too, just the letter X all by itself instantly got the video demonetized, which is what inspired me to name the video Best Smartphone Ever. And in the at the same time, we were joking that Google was demonetizing content about the iPhone. So they were like encouraging people to not make videos about the iPhone because they were seeing other big channels get demonetized when they did their iPhone 10 unboxings. So they were like pushing off the review. They were like, I'm not going to upload my review until YouTube fixes this bug or changes this. So the theory was that Google was biased and suppressing iPhone reviews. So that's why I put in the description to try to get on Google's nice side. The best, the Pixel 2 is an amazing smartphone. I wrote something as a joke in the description to say, oh my God, I love the Pixel so much. And this video is all about the Pixel, because I was trying to convince the YouTube algorithm that it's okay. It's not about an iPhone. It's totally a Pixel video. Eventually that video did get monetized, but it took way longer than it should have. Let's see. If Apple decided not to put iOS 17 on the iPhone 10, what would you do? I mean, I'd probably still talk about iOS 17 and the features they add, but I guess I wouldn't have real world, I wouldn't have like in IRL review of it. I would probably consider upgrading later in the year if there was features in iOS 17 that I really wanted, but based on what we've heard, I don't think iOS 17 is going to be that major. And iOS 16 dropped support for a lot of devices, which is why typically Apple, they'll do big updates that discontinue a bunch of devices, and then they'll do like refinement updates that don't really add that many features, but they improve stability, and they usually offer that on all the same devices as the year prior, which is why I think iOS 17 will be on the iPhone 10, but on the off chance that it's not, just keep in mind I have other old phones that I would consider reviewing. It doesn't mean I would get the 15. I might swap with my wife and get an SE2, because I bet the SE2 that came out in 2020, that'll probably get iOS 17. So maybe we could just talk about it on her phone for that video, and then I'll go back to the 10. Or maybe I'll upgrade to an iPhone 11 Pro, or maybe I'll upgrade to a 12 mini or a 13 mini, or it's my plan B in case something goes horribly wrong with the iPhone 10 and it becomes unusable. My plan B is not to jump straight to iPhone 15 Ultra. That's not what I'm going to. But I will still review the flagship iPhones to talk about. Yeah, I agree with you, Alpha. iOS 17 needs to be an iOS 12 year, and I think it will be. I'm pretty sure it will be. Yeah, M1 Pro CPU-wise has the same as the M1 Max. The only difference is I have a non-binned M1 Max, and I think if I got certified refurbished, I would get a binned M1 Pro, so it wouldn't be the exact same CPU, but yeah, it would be very close. Does 16-inch not have a binned version of the M1 Pro? Interesting. That makes me more interested to try it. Let's see. The 16 gig M1 Pro doesn't really use swap in my usage. Well, that's good, I guess. M1 Pro has half of the media encoders compared to the Max. Exporting video might be slower. I'm sure it would be. I'm just curious how much slower. Like, how much time am I saving by having two of those media encoders? That's what I'm most invested in. Oh no, why only consider iPhones? Asks Computing Deteriorate. I've reviewed Android phones, but I never got that much interest in it. Like, my audience, for better for worse, is very much interested in Apple, as you can tell by the boxes behind me. And I don't think many of them are that interested in my thoughts on Android, based on when I did review Android, the videos didn't do all that well. and I didn't get much feedback on them. Everyone was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, you're the Apple guy. And if people are going to view me as the Apple guy, that's fine because that's the truth. I do prefer Apple. I can get by with Android. I can live with Android. I just don't think it's better. Um, yeah, Android's kind of boring to me. And I don't think it kind of supports the same argument that I'm going for here. Like, I'm using an iPhone. I forgot. I gotta switch this back. I'm using a. Oh, now it's blown up because it's a different resolution input. I'm using an iPhone from 2017 for my day-to-day tasks. You know, it's my car key, it's my camera, it's how I'm texting people, it's how I'm checking email, it's, you know, how I'm managing my bank and finances. That came out nearly 6 years ago, and it's still getting software updates. It's still gaining features. You know, it got the battery percentage update. It got the updated lock screen changes from iOS 16, and it got updates to the widgets over the years, and they redesigned. You know, the new phones don't even have 3D touch. This one still does. You know, there's a lot of things this iPhone has been through, and it's still working. Um, and I don't know if there's that many Android phones that I could say the same thing about or continue using that came out in 2017 and used today. And it's just overall, I've accepted that this is an Apple focused channel. And if I switch to Android, I gotta ditch my Apple Watch. I gotta ditch my Apple Card. I gotta um, just do a lot more work to probably come to a conclusion that I already know the answer to. It would just be a lot of investment, a lot of time, and a lot spent for nothing based on how my videos on Android phones have performed. And I don't really like Android as much as iOS. So I might as well show people that are interested in Apple products. That's why people watch my videos. Um, how to get Apple hardware and software and showcase the longevity, because this is one of the great perks of buying an iPhone, is being able to see how long it lasts and how well it does. Um, and I think that that's one of the strengths of the buying into the Apple ecosystem. But they don't all have to be super expensive, right? Like, that's kind of the point of reviewing iPhone 10, is to showcase, like, okay, this is a $200 phone that's still part of the Apple ecosystem, that still gets software support, that's still gaining features and is still capable. And hopefully, you know, I'm not saying all of you need to go back and downgrade, but it reassures a lot of your decisions for those of you that do buy a brand new flagship right when it comes out and then keep it. You want to know how long it lasts. Well, I'm a channel telling you how long the iPhone 10 can last after all these years. So yeah, I don't think my audience in general is interested in my thoughts on Android, but James Apple says, give the people what they want. Trying to figure out what you guys want is challenging, I'll admit, but I think I'm onto something, at least. Um, let's see. Barely care about Android phone except some brands. They're all suffering from the same problems iPhones are suffering from, which is that they can't really figure out how to make them exciting or unique or different. It's all just iterative updates. And I think my audience is more likely to care about uh, iPhone iterative updates than Android iterative updates, because there's only one big iPhone refresh a year, whereas there's like 15 big Android refreshes a year, and they're all kind of the same. So a used iPhone is better than a new mid-range phone. Simple as that. I agree. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make. I think you're better off buying old flagships than you are new mid-range, like you said. That's why I would say 13 Pro Max is the better buy over the 14 Plus. Because you can find 13 Pro Maxes now for, I think, cheaper than 14 Pluses. They've been out for a while. Nobody in their life will go from S22 Ultra to Galaxy S8. iPhones are more reliable. Yeah, I would like to see someone try. Tell me how that goes. That'd be interesting to see how Androids are doing 6 years later. I bet not as good, personally. But I've been live for a while, and I could do this all day if I'm not careful, so I'm probably going to wrap it up here. But I wanted to give a special thank you to our very few but very crazy Tailosive Tech Ultra supporters. That's Riley McGinnis, Tyler Forte, and Bobby 4C. Yes, I don't know why, but for some crazy reason, there's been 3 separate people that have signed up. Why are you guys doing this? I don't know, but thank you for their extra generous support. Um, oh, Burkhardt's asking, why did I start doing skits on the EV channel? I remember initially you said you don't see yourself doing them since the news is pretty interesting. I I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes the inspiration just kind of strikes, and I was curious what the EV channel would think. And I'm also re-strategizing a little bit because I think the EV space is getting really competitive, and there's a lot of channels now posting EV content, and it's starting to feel more saturated, and I'm not seeing as much growth as I used to, which I don't really care that much about growth, but I was like, I'd like to make content that's meaningful, that people enjoy, and I I don't want to just make EV videos that are repeating the same information that dozens of other channels have already repeated. And I was starting to feel like I may have been falling into that a little bit, but I don't know. I just wanted to see the audience's reaction to doing a skit on EV. I was like, do they all hate it? Do they love it? And I want to make what you guys want to see, obviously. So I'm just experimenting with it, and I've gotten mixed feedback on it. So I did a couple skits on EV, and I'll probably run a poll and see what the audience thinks, because the EV audience is very different from the tech audience, honestly. Um, why don't I get my iPhone 10 battery replaced? Because it still works. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still getting me through the day fine. If it dips below 80% and I start running into issues where it's not running properly, then maybe I'll get the battery replaced. But I can do a whole video on that, and I'll explain the process and how much it costs and stuff. Um, but yeah, I really I appreciate your guys' support and all of my experimentation with content. Also, I just like the videos that we were working on. I got I got a skit idea in my mind for a couple EV videos in a row, and I was like, oh man, I I'll feel bad if I don't do this because it's on my mind right now, and I think it's funny, or I think it's enjoyable. So, oh, thank you. That's too much. Last second, Eric Gonzalez, congrats, you're the last super sticker of the stream, and thank you for the happy birthday wishes. It's very kind of you. Um, I look forward to the next stream, and stay tuned for more videos. All have a good one. Bye bye.